Hello everyone, it's the 7th, is it the 7th Fat Jockey podcast?
It is the 7th.
7th Fat Jockey podcast with the mighty Jono and the mighty Spectre. How are you guys?
Good,
good, thanks.
Yeah, very well. Easy one for me this week, put no effort in, so you've demoted me to a hosting role, which everyone will be thrilled with.
Well, we've got to keep the content quality up, haven't we? So it needs
absolutely. So, there's been thanks everyone for all the questions and ideas for what we're going to discuss. It's going to be mainly based around hurdlers this week. We'll cover the chasers next week. So, bit of alternating. I think, Jono, if you finish yawning for 1 second, is that just a preview of what's to come?
Yeah, I'm excited about this one.
So, Jono, do you want to kick us off regarding any of the Stayers hurdle horses that we might see?
I was going to do that.
Yeah.
Oh, go on then.
So I'll kick us off with these Stayers. So, what a start. We demote you to host. And what's the first thing you do?
What the viewers don't know is we ran through this about less than 5 minutes ago.
We did run through it, and I gave you blue, Stayers, Jono, Commander of Fleet, Stayers contender. And now we're talking, Paul Christmas Hurdle.
No.
What do you mean?
We give you the thing that needs the least prep of what happens. I'll kick off.
Hang on. Who's doing the champion hurdle stuff?
That's
me, that's what we said.
Right, okay. Well, I think we'll catch up. Don't worry, guys. Don't worry. I mean, we could re-record and start again, but there's no chance of that happening. Crack on. What a 1 minute! What a 1 minute 15.
No wonder I was yawning.
Right, come on. Let's talk horses, guys.
Yeah, look, if we stop and restart every time we get it wrong, Kev, we'll still be recording this episode in the new year, so we better crack on. Okay, so Charlie asked a question actually about the Christmas Hurdle. I said that we all want to see Florian Porter versus Classical Dream. Will Classical Dream turn up? And given their clash in March, it makes sense to discuss the races if they will. So we can weigh up the current prices and do it before the race moves the prices. So my first thought on that is I kind of hope that Classical Dream doesn't turn up, Charlie. I wanted to go to Cheltenham Fresh like I did at Punchestown because that's easily his best run. And anything that gets close to Cheltenham, I think potentially Willie needs to find a way to freshen him up. So, this race is probably, I think, as late as you'd want him starting out. If you start him out later, I'd start to get a little bit concerned. I don't think he'll risk running the Dublin Racing Festival and having a hard race there. I'm also not entirely sure it's a good idea taking on Florian Porter first time up anyway. Given Florian Porter's run style, potentially he gets a hard race here. Don't know. It really depends, I suppose, if how far forward Willie's got him and whether he really thinks he needs a run. If he does run, I actually don't particularly mind if he's beaten. His best runs haven't been at Leopardstown. He's kind of the opposite to Shakin Pessoir in that respect. I think he'll finish ahead of Florian Porter in March. I think he's the better of the two horses. But if he's beat at Leopardstown, if he runs, he'll definitely drift and, hopefully to a backable price. The problem you might have there, given his track record, it might make him actually hard to back, unless he's beaten in anything other than the close finish, of course. But it could make him quite hard to back. You won't know how fit he is, or, you can look back at his history and say, is something coming back that we've seen before. So anyway, right now, Florian Porter, I think, is backable, has been for some time. I think probably most of us actually have him backed. But if he hasn't, it's probably the last chance to back him at the bigger prices. As I said, I don't think Classical Dream is the kind of price you want to be backing at right now when we've not seen him. So I'd back Florian Porter now and perhaps Classical Dream later. Interestingly, though, Willie's got Soldier and Mr. Adjudicator entered up for the Christmas Hurdle. I think that's interesting because I've said previously I'd like to see Florian Porter taken on for the lead somewhere. Whether it's here or whether They keep the powder dry and take him on at the festival and don't allow an uncontested lead. I don't know. But, you've got two horses in Soldier and Mr. Adjudicator that are plenty capable of going, a good clip, going the pace. Soldier running Champion Hurdle and Grade 1 2-mile races. So there's no problem with him trying to get to the head of affairs if he really needed to. And I just wonder whether Willie's lining up, a couple of horses to run in the stairs to disrupt Florian Porter then. But Florian Porter's probably the time to get him is right now. I'm not sure that they will run those tactics right now. I think they might save them for March. The horse that I really do hope turns up for the Christmas hurdle is Abacadabras. I mentioned him on a previous podcast. You guys know that I like him. I want to see him over 3 miles in this kind of company so we can get a proper handle on him now. And we can see how much he improves the trip. I think he'll be a big improver for it. I've said previously that his breeding suggests he'll be a thorough stayer. And for me, everything he's done over shorter has made him like him more, really. And I expect him to be a player in March. Obviously, on the subject of a Jigginstown stayer, the question was asked about Commander of Fleet. Made in Japan asked the question whether he thought he'd be a stayers hurdle contender. On his novice hurdle form in the Bartlett, you'd have to be interested. He's obviously had time off. It's been a bit sketchy last season when he was back. That was a big run in that handicap in the Bective Stud handicap. Off 144, 145, something like that, I think it was. That's easily his best run since he's been back. Puts him towards the range you'd want for an improver going into a stayers hurdle, I suppose. I think the bet is actually a bet that Eggs put up on the forum. That's the 101 Christmas hurdle and stayers bet with the Sky Bet specials. I think if he runs a big race in the Christmas hurdle at 100 to 1's going to look quite nice. But if you've only got a point on, and he doesn't run, you're probably not going to be too concerned. So I think that would be the way to get him on side. That's the way I've actually done it. So it was a really good shout out by Eggs, that one, I think.
Was that Sky?
Yeah, that's on Sky Bet. Yeah. I haven't checked today whether that price is still available, so somebody will probably need to. But it certainly was a couple of days ago. Saxon Murray also mentioned the Relkill hurdle on New Year's Day at Cheltenham, whether it might have any impact on the stayers. It has. It's got a bit of a sketchy past. It has thrown up the odd horse. It's really hard to know what will turn up on New Year's Day, if I'm really honest. We've got the Long Walk hurdle on Saturday. Most of the British contenders are entered there. Obviously have to wait and see what actually turns up, of course. I don't think any of those main contenders are likely to skip and go to Cheltenham. I think it's unlikely. They may skip, but I don't think they'll go to the Relkill. The Relkill's more likely going to be, a Florian Porter, don't see it coming type of horse. I think that's often the kind of horse that comes through there. Buzz, I think, would probably be ideal for the race, but I think Henderson said he's not going there, and he's likely to go to the Long Walk or certainly over 3 miles. But I think it's a race to watch effectively. So that nothing really more to say on that, and that's really my roundup on the stayers over Christmas.
Okay, fantastic. That leads us on then to Jono. Anything at the 2 mile division you want to chat about?
So I think there's a few different points that are raised in the forum. Zach mentioned about Tihupu and Saint Felicion, obviously both Gordon Elliott horses, both 5-year-olds. Elliott's come out and said he is keen to split them up, so you're probably not going to get them racing against each other at Christmas. I would still say they're probably more likely to go for a handicap, actually. Obviously, it completely depends on how lenient the UK handicapper is, but I think I wouldn't be surprised if Elliott does the usual of enters them up at some point in the new year, sees what mark they get. I could see St. Felician having the run in the 4-year-old hurdle at Limerick. Wouldn't surprise me if he runs there and then maybe even gets put away He'll get an entry at some point in the UK. I think because he's very much of an unknown, and I think he's, as long as the UK handicapper doesn't hike him up too much, I think he's pretty certain to be a handicap horse come the festival.
It's interesting, John, because he's been quite hyped, hasn't he? And I don't think the handicap is going to be particularly kind on a hyped Gordon Elliott job. They obviously think a lot of him. You know, they've talked him up themselves. So
yeah,
I think on balance, I think you're probably right. But I wouldn't be totally shocked if they think they've got a graded horse on their hands that they might go for it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not always a fairly high mark. Hasn't tended to stop. I think was it Granois last year. He was a was he in the 150s, and they still went the Coral Cup.
150s, yeah.
And actually, the Coral Cup, he has used the race for several 5-year-olds last few years. Granois, Farclas, Cocoa Beach. So I think that will probably be in his mind. I also just think, is he really going to be too fussed of running them in the Champion Hurdle against Honeysuckle? I'm not really sure what the benefit is, in all honesty. If his hands forced, say the UK handicapper slaps him with just 2 stupid marks, maybe they go just for the sake of it. But at the same time, he could potentially look at sort of running him in Ireland and not even going to the festival. So, in terms of Champion Hurdle picture, I don't really see them both featuring, but you never know. If they could also put in a performance that elevates them into the race as well. But yeah, I'd be surprised if they're featuring, in all honesty.
What you want to say is they've got no chance.
No chance. Is that a literal no chance, or you need to clarify? So I think another point raised was Eggs said if there was any novice chaser that might revert. I can't see it. I mean, if you look, Appreciate It hasn't run over fences. Yeah, I don't see any way. Yes, he hasn't been out yet, but that's not an issue. It's a funny old season with the weather. It's fine. I think what you've got to remember, I think, is if you're going to revert these novice chasers over hurdles for a Champion Hurdle crack, you're basically looking at 2 scenarios. You're looking at one, is the division there for the taking? Absolutely not this year. I mean, Honeysuckle, why? I mean, just take and Appreciate It. What would you fancy? Having an Arkle, running in the Arkle, or taking on Honeysuckle?
I think the difficult thing is, like, the year Bouvardere did it, it was quite did something get injured that year when he hadn't looked that good? Because now it's impossible to really believe anything to take on Honeysuckle, like you're saying. But if she got injured, then I suppose that's when you'd have to reassess, isn't it? But
I think that's
very hard to predict.
But I think with, I mean, you take, say, Bob Ollinger, Fernie Hollow, because they've already won that novice chase, for them to revert now, they'd have just wasted a novice chase season. Yeah, I can't see that. And I think, in all honesty, if Honeysuckle, obviously fingers crossed, nothing happens. If something happened, I think Mullins would think he's got a fair crack with Sharjah, to be honest. So yeah, I'd be very surprised if there's anyone reverting, doing a Bouvardere. So.
Well, there's also Echoes in Rain, isn't there? That if you're going to talk about him, Stop Me Now, or her rather, Stop Me Now. But Paul Townend's back. You'd hope, having the experience of, getting a settle last season and what that took, she potentially could be a different horse with him on board and actually getting the freshness out of her after that first race as well.
Yeah.
Willie's got enough to go with that race without, wasting horses that could be, future champion chasers, future Gold Cup winners.
Yeah, exactly. I think like they did with Bouvardere, if you're going to revert someone back to a Champion Hurdle, you basically stick him that's their career from there in.
Yeah.
And I don't. There's few horses that I think fit that profile this year.
Yeah, agreed.
So I think then it was just focusing on kind of loosely on the. Obviously, you got the Matheson Hurdle in Ireland.
The what?
Get that right after 5 times.
Should we start the podcast again?
We better.
Roll it again. And the Kempton Hurdle in the UK. I think Saxon Warrior brought up the Kempton race and Charlie the Irish race. In terms of Kempton, just hard to get excited, in all honesty. We haven't got any entries, but it's really probably looking at the same kind of players that we've had over the last 2 seasons. Silver Streak will line up, Epatante will line up. I imagine So Real will have a break now. He's had 4 runs. Probably go chasing in the new year. I can't see him lining up. Not So Sleepy, obviously dead heated with Epatante in the fighting 5th. He's actually not run at the Kempton race. He's actually gone to the Ascot handicap, 2-mile handicap the last 2 seasons. But he's got no chance now of his current rating.
No.
So he could line up, and he's interesting. Epatante's a funny one where I think she travelled and jumped as well as she has for probably well over a year. Last time out, didn't really find much at the end of the race. Whether that's fitness, we'll find out.
I think didn't Aidan Coleman say he pressed the button a bit too soon as well? He should have waited. So to be fair to me, blame himself. How right that is, and how much it was that, how much is fitness, and how much is how much ability he's got right now. Who knows? But
yeah,
I suspect if she gets turned over, I'm doing the mare's hurdles shortly. If she gets turned over, that starts to come into range for her, doesn't it? Don't think she will.
Yeah,
don't think she
definitely...
will. I think she'll win at Kempton, by the way. But,
she should. So yeah, she should win. Obviously, we've been here before though with last season where she should have won. But yeah, you'd be disappointed if she doesn't win. Like you said, actually, the mares, I would be interested. She settles a lot better now. Obviously, a couple of years ago, it was the bare minimum trip and nothing else. Whereas I think they actually could definitely have a shot at trying 2-mile 4. But I mean, Henderson, JP, they're going to go champion hurdle, surely, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's one of those situations where she wins, she goes champion hurdle anyway. She doesn't win, you're just worried about her, aren't you? Do you know what I mean? I'm not sure if she was turned over and beaten, fairly comfortably at Kempton, whether you'd be that excited about if they did drop her into the mares anyway. You'd be more questioning, just how good she is anymore. But for what it's worth, I think she'll be fine at Kempton. I think she'll win a big race. Yeah.
It's interesting. You just mentioned Aidan Coleman, how he kind of blamed himself. I mean, the only thing I would say is I'm not sure how late you can go. I mean, I'm pretty sure she took it up after the last, and I mean, you're not giving yourself much time. If that's going too soon, then yeah, I just thought it was quite a
bit of deflection comment.
Yeah, fair enough if he took it up kind of 2 hours or something, but
it's interesting though. I mean, Aidan Coleman actually is generally worth listening to. He's pretty straightforward and pretty straight with the stuff he says. That a lot of connections will say what they think people want to hear, but you never get that feeling with Aidan Coleman. I'm inclined to take his view, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
In his mind, he can ride her differently and ride her better. So let's see what happens at Kempton. Let's see if he does exactly that. But really what he's saying is he wants to deliver as late as possible.
Yeah. Just before you finish on them, do we know if Echoes in Rain or it's being aimed at that Matheson hurdle?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the aim. I mean, I think the worry you have with her is it's probably going to be another small field.
Yes.
Isn't ideal. I'd be
She's 8 to 1
interested.
now if she is going, and it's a small field. That's not the worst thing ever, is it?
Yeah, I'd be
3
interested
places 8 to 1.
if they were to run Stormy Island in it. Purely just bounce her out. I mean, she did it in the Hatton's Grace and fell back near the end, but just be interesting if they just to make sure there's pace in the race. If she was to run.
You've thrown an interesting, again, it's going to take us on a slight side here, but you've thrown an interest, something that's been floating around my mind actually with Stormy Island. She's never a horse I've totally taken to. I know she's been popular at times, but I can see exactly that. And the reason I can see exactly that is I can see her end up in the County Hurdle. I can absolutely see her ending up in the County Hurdle, running in these graded races, setting off, making sure there's good pace in them, not finishing out of races, getting dropped by the handicapper, popping up as a good graded horse in the County Hurdle for Willie Mullins.
Yeah, it's a good,
just fits that,
shout,
she fits that brief, doesn't she?
Yeah,
and she's pretty useful along the season doing that.
Second, what's she rated compared to Echoes in Rain?
Oh, good question. Good question. I'm not sure what her current rating is.
Echo, I wouldn't say. Well, I've just guesswork, but Echoes in Rain getting beaten again. It wouldn't surprise you if she's then off a bit and popped up.
I mean, the County Hurdle with someone like Echoes in Rain should, that'd play right up to a street. Sanois
must be coming back down again now. He's going for the back up off a big weight.
He's got an entry over Christmas as well. So he could be
for them. Would he be in the Matheson as well?
Yep, he's entered up. Obviously, talked about as a novice chaser. So it's interesting that they've put the hurdle entry in.
He's not got any entries because I've cashed him out for. I backed him for the Arkle and the Marsh and then switched it last week because no entries. So interesting if he gets entered for anything.
I think he did get an entry in a hurdle somewhere, or I'm sure I picked some that was entered in a hurdle somewhere.
He's certainly not going to be winning the Arkle then.
But I can't see him. He's still going to be high 150s, close to 160 race over hurdles. So he's going to be tough on a handicap somewhere.
Yeah, there's
going to be high 140s. High 140s, maybe touching 150 or something like that.
I wouldn't like.
He comes down 2 or 3 pounds, gets into that sort of 145 to 148 bracket. That makes her interesting for something like County Hurdle, I think.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, so any other thoughts on any horses there, or are we ready to move on to the juveniles?
Just to end. Sharjah just looks hard to beat in that, to be honest. 6 to 4, you can get on with a couple of places. That's not a bad price actually. If you want to kind of roll it up or put a few of those in some bets. This year is probably going to be the easiest renewal that he's won of the race. Obviously, he's going for the full-timer. Looked as consistent as ever last time. It's going to be a small field. There's nothing that should worry him too much. It's interesting that they might skip the Dublin Racing Festival this year with him, even though I think they are switching the track. And I think the February race should be more in line with the Christmas track. That was just quite an interesting thing, even though he's disappointed every time there, but still comes second in the Champion Hurdle. So it's not done any harm.
No, absolutely. Actually, maybe the biggest threat to him is actually Echoes in Rain if she settles. The other thought with her, by the way, is also the county, because she's low 140s at the moment. She'll get a bit of tax from the UK handicapper, so she'd probably end up mid 140s. If she gets
that not 2 minutes earlier.
Did you?
Yeah.
Apologies, Kev.
It's all right.
She's low 140s, isn't she? So, she gets beat again comfortably. The UK handicapper is not going to hit it too hard, you wouldn't think. So, obviously agreement there.
Yeah, I think this race will pinpoint probably where she goes. If there's promise there, they might try Champion Hurdle. But I think, she's definitely better than her mark if they can get her run into her potential. So definitely an interesting one.
Well, you would think that Willie Mullins would want her finishing very close or even beating Soldier for her to book a place in the Champion Hurdle. And if she can't do that, then they'll be thinking about another route.
Yeah. So essentially, Johnny, your tip is 6-4. Roll up all the odds-on favourites that we've tipped up on all the other pods so far. Back Sharjah, just with every favourite so far.
Why are you surprised? You know this pod. Favourite.
Fab. So, what are we going to use Sharjah to roll up then to win the Boodles, Paul?
Oh, well, we'll start with we'll talk about the juveniles generally, I think. So there were a couple of questions around. The first one was from L Burr 422. The question was who to take Phil Dorr on with, and will Phil Dorr win the night? Frank. Look, to be honest, I'd prefer, I think, Phil Dorr to wait for the spring hurdle at the DRF. He's on the programme to take this in, though. If you look at Gordon Elliott's normal sort of habits, he is en route as preps to come to this race. So I think he probably will. The reason I say I'd rather he waited the spring hurdle is because Elliott tends to send his best juvenile to the spring hurdle. And that's the way he split Quiluxios and Zanahir last year and what he's done typically in the past. And the spring hurdle is a better guide to the Triumph winner than the Knight Frank over Christmas. But, I think we all agree that Gordon Elliott's the master of the juveniles, so, I probably shouldn't really care. He's got a great record in this race. He's got a great record in the Triumph. He's got a great record in the Boodles. And, you tot up all his graded juvenile winners, he's probably got as many as all the other big name trainers put together. So, that's how good he is with these horses. Actually, talking about the Boodles, he usually runs his best horse for the Boodles in this. Not necessarily his best horse in this. And it'll be a horse that's probably runs down the field somewhere. Certainly doesn't finish in the front two. So it's worth taking note of any other entries he has in there. Makes me wonder whether maybe Iberic de Soy will turn up there to run down his mark for the Boodles. Don't know. There is one that I'm really interested with that's with him, a horse called Leishan. He's a horse that I'm expecting big improvement from at some point. So I'm gonna mark him out as one for people to watch out for. He's not shown a whole lot in two juveniles so far, but I know he was highly rated in France. There is some cross form there that's sort of worth looking at with one of Willie's to come out later. Parmenion, I'm going to touch on him later. And those two met in France, and although Parmenion won, Leishan came out better at the weights, and I know that the Mullins stable like Parmenion, so just feels to me either Leishan's taken a bit of time to acclimatise, but knowing the stable well, I think we'd all be suspicious and think maybe it's been the start of maybe getting a mark for the Boodles. Two quite low-key runs. Give him a good run somewhere, goes and wins one of the non-graded juveniles somewhere, perhaps, after running in one of these decent races. He's got a high 120s, maybe a low 130s mark for the Boodles, and I think he'd be interested if that happened. So there's one to put in your notebooks, boys, a horse called Leishan. But unless there's something else we haven't seen yet, I think they're probably the three of his to focus on this season. The only thing I'd say is, if he puts something in the entries for the Knight Frank that's debuting that we haven't seen, that would be the only reason I think I'd be interested in any other of Gordon Elliott's juveniles this season. I think they're the only three that I've been through thoroughly and sort of got my interest. Same for Willie Mullins, actually. Mullins tends to run his Triumph Hurdle contenders in this race, usually on their debut for him. Uses this race and the Fairy House Juvenile in February. They're normally his 2 ports of call. I know some people have talked about Gaelic Warrior. He's not one for me. I think he's one for later. The 2 that I think, assuming they do come out this season, because he does have a habit of leaving them off for a season, but the 2 I think that I'm watching out for are Vauban and Parmenion. I think they're like to be his 2 best juveniles, so I'm watching for entries. So I'm thinking perhaps 1 here and one for Fairy House in February. Joseph O'Brien's not averse to a Boodle's plot and running down the field in this race either. There's a horse called 6 Feet Apart that won earlier in the season at Fairy House and then was brought over here to Aintree and finished 3rd. Seemingly not running the same kind of race as he did at Fairy House. Interesting that he came all the way over to Aintree to finish 3rd, where the UK handicappers had a proper look at him. And we fairly can rate him, and it's kind of it's one of those things that went into my notebook. So there's one just to put in your notebook and watch out for 6 Feet Apart, perhaps as a Boodle's plot. A couple more I'm waiting to see. There's a horse in Old Meads called Ben Siegel, who's actually all the same connections as Jeff Kidder last year. Albert Draven's name and Scanlon own him as well. I'd be if he comes here, I'd be looking for him to run down the field and perhaps be a Boodle's contender. They may think more of him than that, of course, but we know what they did last year with Jeff Kidder, and you would think they knew they had a really good juvenile there, and they just had a seriously well handicapped hurdle, a horse for the Boodle's hurdle. So I'm wondering if Lightning potentially will strike twice there with Ben Siegel. The last one I'm going to talk about for the Knight Frank is Gentleman Joe, Rob Core horse with Henry de Bromhead. He was actually 4th behind Ben Siegel 5 or 6 weeks ago. He was hampered in the race. It looked as though he was handled reasonably tenderly from there. He wasn't going to win from where he was. He would have had a hard race if they really if they went for it. So I wonder whether he's going to end up as a contender for either race. I think they like him, but where he turns up and how he runs probably dictates where he goes. So again, one to watch out for over the Christmas period. There are a couple of, in fact, there are 3 juveniles to watch out for over in Ireland. A couple at Leopardstown and 1 at Limerick, I think. So, who knows what's going to turn up where. But the Knight Frank's probably the one that, you're looking for Gen Triumph Hurdle contenders and looking a bit further down the field for some Boodle contenders. Talking about the Boodles, there was a question from 4 over through 2, who clearly is a golfer much the same as me. Pretty rubbish because I'll be quite happy if I was 4 over through 2. Champion Green had his debut over hurdles recently. He asked if he's the Boodles winner. And Big Cheng's also asked us to name the Boodles winner. Well, I was saying to you guys beforehand, I can't even name the Boodles winner after the Boodles, so I'm probably not the right person to answer that question. But I've got 4 horses to watch, and actually Champion Green is one of them. He could be a complete plot job. He ran like one. He was very tenderly handled. But he could easily be a Triumph Hurdle horse that was just getting a bit of an education, and they didn't want to give him a tough time. They just wanted to get him out on the racecourse. So, I'm not sold either way at the moment. Kevin Blake, interestingly, picked him out as the best of Joseph juveniles, and Kevin Blake does Joseph's race planning, so he's likely to know, and he's normally on the money. I quite like Kevin Blake. He's right up there in terms of the pundits that are out there at the moment. He's one that I'm likely to listen to and take notice of. So look, Champion Green, I think if he gets the entry in the Knight Frank, it's it's a question of if he runs and how he runs, and that will answer the question, given they believe he has plenty of ability. So
he's I've just seen he's Unibet priced it up and he's 16-1 for the Boodles now.
Yeah.
That is bananas, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's not an open secret that it was tenderly handled, to be fair, Kev. I'm not surprised that they're quite cautious with that.
I'm just surprised there's even a market.
Well, look, honestly, if he runs down the field in the night Frank at Christmas, I'd be taking 16-1. I think he'll be an out-and-out plot job at that stage. Aramax Mark 2 for JP.
Yeah.
Ben Siegel I've already mentioned. I think he could potentially be one of those that sort of runs down the field, but he could equally be they could see him as a Triumph Hurdle horse, as I said. Leishan, I really feel that though he's being messed around with, he's under the radar and nobody's seen him in 6 feet apart. I've also mentioned because I thought that entry and run was interesting. So probably the fall on my radar at the moment for the Boodles. I can't. Sorry, Big Chan, I can't give you the Boodles winner. Probably.
Leishan's 50. Leishan's 50 with Unibet, and Ben Siegel is 20. And
I wouldn't be averse to taking a bit of 50-1. Unibet's not available to me, so I can't do that. Probably shouldn't be suggesting until I can get on it. But
I'll put it on for
podcast.
I'll get it on for you, mate.
Oh, that'd be very kind of you if you could.
I'm not sure. I don't pay out though either.
The Triumph Phil Dor is the obvious one in this world. The beat Phil Dor in France, I think, is probably better value and looks pretty smart to me. He's with Dan Skelton, so we can't ignore the horses over here. We've talked about all the Irish horses. Don't know whether in this world it's going to be out over Christmas or maybe on New Year's Day. You would think they'd want to get some experience of Cheltenham in, which means either New Year's Day or Trials Day. I think it'll probably be held back for Trials Day. Night Salute obviously ran last weekend. He's been to Cheltenham already. Again, perhaps won't see him out over Christmas, but he's the sort of horse that will be under bet because he's got unfashionable connections, really. And I like him. He's the type that just does enough and he pulls out a bit more when it's needed. He's the kind of horse that I like for a Triumph Hurdle. He is the kind of type that surprises at the bigger prices. So I think he's worth keeping an eye on. I mentioned the two Willie Mullins horses, Vauban and Parmenion. I think those two, watch out for them coming out over Christmas, or at least one of them coming out over Christmas. And as I said, there's some cross form with Leishan and Parmenion. That's going to be quite interesting to see how that works its way through. And I think after Christmas, you start to look at the best trials. Christmas doesn't really give the complete picture. It gives you the contenders, the definitive trials from there, normally the finesse on Trials Day at Cheltenham and the Spring Juvenile at the Dublin Racing Festival. They're the ones that sort out the pecking order. And occasionally you get a bit of a surprise horse that pops up late in the Adonis at Kempton, an Alan King or a Nicky Henderson Juvenile. So that's me with the juveniles.
Okay, fabulous. So that leads us on to what we've got left. Novice hurdlers. Big man. That's you in it, Johnny.
Yep. Yeah, so again, quite a few kind of topics on this one.
There's
one
what,
of
do you want
which
me, let me go?
Probably pull his
What's this? Ginto Hollow Games?
Finger out and give a.
I think when I can discuss that. I think I did tip up Ginto on that Long Shots podcast. He came out and won really well. I think they did mention the Lords at Nace for him, but then since then I read that he is looking to split them up, which I was hoping that they'd both meet at Nace. So to be honest, I don't know how they'll get split up. I was hoping that they would clash and sort themselves out. I don't really think that one of them will be a Ballymore horse and one will be an Albert Bartlett. I think one will be an Albert Bartlett and one will be a handicap horse. But again, I'm just waiting for them to run and sort themselves out. It's hard now to get on either for anything other than what they're already on. I'm not that interested in either for the Ballymore at the prices they're at either. So I don't know what the latest is. I haven't seen anything since. I just read that they might be split up, which wasn't originally what he'd said. So That's all I can really offer on that.
I think they're going to find it really hard to split them. I don't think they know. I don't think they know. And if they can't answer the question, I think it's pretty hard for us to. They're going to have to do their talking on the race course somewhere, and it may well be that he sends them both to the Albert Bartlett.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, I'd be thrilled to bits with that. Absolutely thrilled to bits.
The thing is, they're not without pace though. So you could easily see a case for one of them dropping back. That's the thing. But I'm like you, Kev. I don't think I'd have either of them at the top of my list for the Ballymore, but I'd be very interested in both the Albert Bartlett.
Well,
I do think Ginto probably surprised them a bit actually on his last run.
I think so too.
I think he probably got himself back ahead of Hollow Games. Actually, I would say, and I mean strictly on a line through. If you look at Joseph O'Brien's the Little Yank, Ginto beat him 19 lengths against Hollow Games 8 lengths, and that was with Hollow Games getting £3. So strictly for a line there. Obviously, it was a grade 2 against a grade 3. But like you say, I think they could go either. There's no point making a decision now. There's no need for it.
No.
I think
what is the other race he's mentioned
both
for? Which is the other race he's mentioned? Can you remember off? I didn't read it. It was a while ago. I read it now.
I remember.
No. I just hope he runs them against each other.
Yeah,
then we know. Then we know which one's the one.
Well, they're interested in breeding as well. Sorry, go on, John.
So he mentioned the Lawlers at Nace for Hollow Games, and then following Ginto's win, he mentioned that again for Ginto and the need to kind of split them up. So yeah, he hasn't really made any kind of name checks for possible races. I mean, Hollow Games ran 21st of November, so that does open up Christmas potentially. I'd be surprised if Ginto was out before probably that mid-January point. But yeah, I think it's very much up in the air with those two at the moment.
Yeah, but I think just to sort of bring the breeding angle in, Ginto's a walk in the park out of a Cadgedale mare, which is, a walk in the park is generally 2 to 2.5 milers, but Cadgedale was an out-and-out stayer. So, that's an interesting sort of combination, really. If the sire was dominant, he's probably more on the 2 mile side, and if the mare side of the breeding is dominant, then he's wants 4 miles. So they can only really do what he shows them on the racecourse, really. And Hollow Games is pretty much flatbred. He's out of a beat hollow. He's a beat hollow out of a Razor Grand mare. And often flat breeding can throw out stayers on over hurdles. But you probably look at those 2 lines of breeding and say Hollow Games is, if you just took a breeding angle, is probably likely to be a bit quicker than Ginto. So they may take those things into consideration too.
Maybe we'll see. We'll see where they end up. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that. The next one. Do you think so? Kilcrut's the one that's next on our list here. So, how do you feel about that? They came out and said, didn't they, that David Casey was quite happy with it. He's like went for the old cliche: if he took the winner out, he's walloped the field kind of thing, which is interesting. Sort of no excuses given. So, how do you feel about him? Because he's a horse that I wasted all my free bets on that I'd been collecting for the Supreme, so I was not too happy with that.
I'm not massively disappointed in him, if I'm honest. I think he's a nice horse. He showed that last season, isn't he? So, why would you discount him now? I think people would be more cautious, and his original price was terrible. But those kind of horses that people say are very easy to get fit, which is what they'd said beforehand, very often full trainers, and they're not fully fit. They just give that impression because they're They're reasonably light framed. They don't carry too much weight. They don't eat like a pig in the field all summer. You know, they come in not carrying too much condition, and it feels as though they're easy to get fit. But race fit and fit aren't always the same thing. And lots of trainers have been fooled by his type. So the other thing I'd say is, you know, Willie is not one to have his horses hard fit first time up anyway. There's always something left to work on. You know, he's got targets later in the season. So, and the noises at the stable weren't particularly downbeat, I didn't think.
No. How many of his Supreme horses or Ballymore horses do get beat first time out though? Is there many?
There's plenty of us been beaten over the years first time. You know, having a perfect 1-1-1-1 record's nice to have, but it's not essential either.
There was that.
Forgive most is the seasonal debut.
Yeah, there was that nice little run, wasn't there? That probably skews it a little bit with some of those superb Supreme winners he had. So.
And the other thing is, you know, you've got to look at Largy debut, and you've got to say, you know, he's a good horse. I think he's...
Yeah. What do you think? He's not on our list, but what did you two think of him?
I liked him. You know, clearly he's got a big engine, hasn't he? You know, had some time off. They've had to take the time with him. He's a bit older, just like appreciate it was this season. You know, that old stat that, you know, 7-year-olds in the Supreme is nonsense because there's hardly any ever run. There's a reason that 7-year-olds don't win. It's because they've already been out and done that kind of thing. So, you know, I think it's interesting whether he goes to the Supreme or the Ballymore. You know, if you just look at the breeding side, you know, you'd think he'd want a bit more of a trip, but he didn't run like that, did he? So, you know, if he can back it up, you know, he gets really interested. And it's not every time that Willie Mullins and Nicky Henderson win that race. There's the odd year when somebody else does. And there's no better man than Henry de Bromhead right now. So we'll see. I'm not unhappy with either horse. I think Kilcrook could easily come on for that race. And I think Largy debut ran a really nice race.
What about you, Johnny?
Yeah, I'd give Kilcrook another go. I mean, did he get beat at 1-14? Ridiculous odds.
Yeah.
I think the winner was very impressive. He'll probably go for a run at Christmas. He was quite well thought of, although you didn't really hear much of this until after the race. But yeah, it's not the first time that Willie Mullins has had this. Has had a shock first time out. Actually, talking about the Ballymore,
Senna Walk, Animix.
He got beat. He got beat. Gaillard de Maynil got beat. Well beaten actually against the Bromhead Holy Macapone.
Macapone.
And he came on at Christmas, bolted up, right back into the Ballymore picture, and obviously was the Ballymore favourite for a long time up until Jamie Codd told everyone Bob Ollinger was a God-given certainty. Statler as well last season, he got beaten. Granted, Vanillier was in front of him. He went on to win the Albert Bartlett, but you had a couple in front of him. He was beaten 4-7. Again, he came back, didn't win the Albert Bartlett, was a hot favourite for the race. The big getaway last season. He disappointed massively in his first run, odds on, and again put it behind him at Christmas. So yeah, I wouldn't discount Kilcrook at all. I do think it's interesting. You mentioned David Casey and Willie Mullins himself. Both were fairly happy with the run. And yeah, like Paul says as well, he is a difficult horse to get right. He was obviously beaten by Captain Kangaroo famously on his stable debut. And Tony Mullins said he needs very little work. I think they did one bit of work too much, and it just left all his chances behind him. So potentially, yeah, he's a quite hard horse to gauge.
That's an interesting point, though, isn't it, Jono? Because Tony Mullins said that they did one gallop too many with him on his seasonal debut, He's gone to his brother.
Yeah.
Just as likely he's had one gallop too little as a
Yeah.
consequence.
Yeah, exactly.
It
that could
can't
play in their
affect-
mind.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think we'll touch on the future Champions Novice, but it wouldn't surprise me maybe if he turned up there. Actually,
Yeah, I think he probably will. That's my thoughts too. I think that's where we'll see him next. They'll want to run
Charlie,
the
I would love to see him run there. I mean, Charlie just wanted to see our thoughts on that race. I think it's interesting. The race is kind of it's one of these races where we all love it. It gets the entries. It gives a good pointer for kind of who Mullins sees as his potential Grade 1 novice hurdlers. But rarely actually do they run. It's generally a kind of a race where it's the second string of his supreme runners if they do run. I mean, the last 20 the last 10 run-ins of the race, Mullins has had 20 runners, all in run prior during the winter. Now, obviously, this year is slightly different. Everyone's delayed, so that run some of them might have had already. They haven't, but I would be pretty sure that's going to stay the same case. I don't think he's going to chuck any of these horses, so like your State Mans, your Hibriscos, as a Classic Getaway. I don't think they're going to go first time out. So I think, it's a great race to kind of get an early gauge of who he might think ends up as his supreme horse. But I think it's going to be quite narrow, actually, of the horses that will run. And appreciate it, ran and won in it last year. He's the only one in that whole period. Mullins has had the likes of Sharjah, Aramon, but they were clear second strings in their years. And I think you could argue, maybe appreciate it, he wanted to just see early on, given the Fernie Hollow setback, whether he was a 2-miler and whether he would step up. And obviously he proved he was a horse well capable of 2 miles. And in terms of the kind of supreme, like I said, it's a good race for entries, but he's got much bigger races that are bigger pointers. Moscow Flyer, not so much now. That has been a race, the likes of Getabird, Min, Duvan, Vatour, so all the kind of Richie horses. I mean, purely just from the race that you want, the supreme runner is the Chanel Farmer Dublin Racing Festival.
Yeah,
used to be the Deloitte. Appreciate it. Classical Dream, Mysterium Phalange, Vatour, Champagne Fever. That's the one. Obviously not till later in the season, but basically, if the horse doesn't line up there, that's when you got to worry.
That's right. You watch those entries like a hawk.
Yeah.
And do you not think? Do you think he'll have like a lower key run with a view to working out a supreme horse in that race, then, rather than throw something like a Statement or a Briscoe into this one on the 27th?
I mean, I'm hoping, like I've just mentioned, I'm hoping Kilcruck can give another go. I mean, if you were to just look at the entries and those horses that have had a run, it takes you to 5 possible horses. Arctic Warrior has been highly tried. It'd be a back number. Wouldn't surprise me if he turns up.
The handicap somewhere, you'd think.
Yeah,
Given
exactly. He's got festival handicap all over. Farut, again, disappointed a couple of times. Probably going to be a back number in the race. I hope Kilcruck would run there. I think it's ideal for him to kind of prove whether he is 2 miles. If he can't win there, then they'll obviously step him up. Could well take on for a repeat of the last race as well. I don't know if they talked about whether Largy Debut is going to run there. I'm quite keen to see Third Strike Life. Obviously, he missed his last race due to the ground, but I think he's definitely interested. I think he's got more pace than what your kind of typical Elliott horse.
He fits the brief as well. He's this year's Abacadabras, isn't he? From 2 years ago, finished third or fourth in the Champion Hurdle. He comes out of it better than Abacadabras did as well. He played up at the start. He played up on the way down. He played up at the start. He reared up and spun round at the start. Most horses you'd be looking and thinking you've already lost your race. And albeit he didn't win, he still ran a big race. And we'll wait and see if he's still a bit of a head case. But if he's not and he's settled down a bit, I think there's a lot of talent in that horse. And I think he's a supreme novice horse.
Absolutely. Then there's only two other possible Mullins runners based on that criteria. What to want, sponsors.
The Ballymore.
The owners sponsor the Ballymore, so
they've literally said that as well, because I asked the question. Someone said that Mullins has name dropped that race for that reason as well.
So I can't see them taking on the 2 mile race at Christmas. Gronji, she could be an interesting one. She's probably the other.
She'd go mares. She'd go mares novice though, wouldn't she? Surely.
Yeah. I don't think she'll go supreme, but I just think wherever they were to run her over Christmas could be an interesting one with that allowance. But a lot like you, I think she's got mares novice written all over her.
Do you know who is the highest rated?
I think Willie will run a mare in open company, and she was the one that was on my mind. I thought it about her for some considerable time. Now, I could be completely off the mark and wrong, but he's got a lot of mares to split up this season. I'm going to touch on them shortly. But in the context of what you're talking about now with the novice hurdles, she is one that's been on my mind for open novice hurdles since way back when, since the end of last season when I was thinking about all of my early bets. Whether it be the Supreme or the Ballymore is a different matter. I've just got a sneaking suspicion one of his is going to run with a £7 mares allowance in open company.
It surprised me in the Supreme with there being a 2 mile race, but he has done it with. He's run mares in the Ballymore and Albert Bartlett before, hasn't he? It's like Salsaretta.
Yeah.
Although not Salsaretta, might be someone else. But anyway. Quiz for you. Who is the highest rated horse, official or RPR, entered in the future Novice Champions race?
Good question.
I don't think you'll get it. Second is Larchy Debut. Third, My Mate Mozzie. That's RPR.
Come on, put that on misery.
It's Mrs. Lorna Fowler's horse, Colonel Mustard.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, beat Champagne Vacation, but finished. She's the one that finished up behind Echoes and Rain, which is where she got the where it got the rating from, had she?
Oh, of course, yeah.
Related double there. Smash it up. Okay, brilliant. So, what have we got left here? Anything shallow, hurdle or toll with thoughts? Probably a bit early for that.
Yeah, tough one to know what's going to be there. We've talked about the Nichols horses. There's been talk about Henson's horses. We probably should touch on those, I guess, in the context of the novice hurdles. We've seen some really good horses now from Henderson. We saw Iron Maximus come out on his second run, improve massively, and clearly, on that he needed that first run. But he's got legs that fly everywhere. It's the weirdest running action that you've ever seen. We've got Constitution Hill that was very impressive. Oh, how good was he? He was really good. Yeah. And John Bond, that they're still convinced.
He's the one that's got me most excited.
I've seen
saying John Bond is the real deal, aren't they?
I think I've seen the worst bet in the history of the world involving John Bond, and it's John Bond to win the Supreme next year, the Arc the year after, and the Champion Hurdle. What price do you think that is?
Oh, look, knowing where the bookmakers are these days, probably single figures.
66 to 1, but that is absolutely awful. Three festival wins in a row. I wouldn't take 66 to 1 for any horse to win the next 3 festivals. That is absolutely awful.
It is filthy. There is another Nicky Henson horse that we've not seen yet that, again, has been talked up sort of amongst the stable staff it sort of came out from, which is Russian Ruler. It's only run in a bumper, fairly low key, so it's hard to know. We can't tell anything from that really. It was just some interesting noises, and the stable are quite good for that in terms of the right kind of vibes. Also, it's quite interesting following the money in the last 5 minutes with the Henderson stable as well. Some of these horses are going to have to be split up. We've got Hob House, we've got Balco Coastal. Balco Coastal is probably almost certainly going to be more. So there's some interesting ones there. Paul Nichols.
He was the one. Was he the one? Sorry, was he the one? Yeah, it was that Unibet, the stable video, wasn't it, where they all gave their horse to follow?
Yeah,
he got about
he was
6
the one.
or 7 mentions, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
He did. We've not seen him yet, and it's always been quiet. So maybe we won't. Who knows? But again, it's just one to put on your watch list, I think. When he comes out, I mean, Henderson's not averse to bringing him out late either for both novices and juveniles, so I wouldn't be overly concerned about that. But ideally you want to see him out over Christmas, but at the very least you need to see him at some point in January, and you want him to have at least a couple of runs. So, what else we've got? We've got the Nichols horses. We've got Nappers Hill, which hasn't overly impressed, I don't think, so far. But he is the kind that the Nichols improves. He is a Nichols improver. They get better.
He's second favourite for this weekend. Is he up against this week up against John Bon?
Yes.
Yeah, he's running Friday.
Yeah. And
is that tomorrow? No, it's Wednesday.
Yeah, a couple of days. And you've got Stage Star, who's probably been the best of his novice hurdlers so far. Stage Star's the one that was beaten a couple of times by Nappers Hill in bumpers. But he's the one that seems to improve the most for a hurdle. So, and interestingly, I'd probably have to check my facts here, but I seem to recall that when the two of them met first time in bumpers, Stage Star was the one that was fancied more than Nappers Hill. I think that's right. Could be wrong, but there's something that either the noises that came out of the stable at the time or prices that they went off at. Stage Star was the one that they thought was going to be the better of the two on debut.
Yeah, he went off 13-8 favourite. Nappers Hill was 9-2.
Yeah, there we go. Christ, my memory's not completely packed up. But Stage Star's probably run as well as anything over the 2.5 mile trip so far this season, if I'm honest. He is, I think, that may have changed now, but certainly a week or so ago, he was the shortest price in the betting of the Ballymore of horses that have run. Now, that's probably changed now because there have been some horses that have run over 2 miles that are now considered as potential Ballymore horses. We've seen money for, what's the one of Gordon Elliott's that's run over 2 miles so far? Juvenile, novice, can't think of the name. Was second in the Royal
Mighty
Bond.
Potter.
Mighty Potter.
Oh yeah.
You've got horses like him that are now being quoted for the Ballymore, and you've got Largy
Dynamo.
Dysart Dynamo, horses like that. They've only run over 2 miles so far. But of those that have run over 2.5, Stage Star is the shortest and the better, I think. And he's quite interesting. Is he likely to be the winner come March? No, I think it's probably going to be better than him. But at 20-1, there's probably worse each way shots for a UK horse.
Yeah, I have quite a general sweeping just thought process to start, but Paul Nichols has had some amazing horses that haven't won over hurdles, and just the way he trains, it's never at the forefront of my mind, no matter how good they are or how good I think they'll be or how hyped up they are or how good they look over these shores. It's never the first thing I think, oh brilliant, I must get him back for Cheltenham. As a guy who makes a book as well, I would back them. It's just they're not forefront of my mind, so
yeah, sure.
I agree with that. It's just obviously might be interesting for on the way. for sure.
Yeah, exactly. The other one, there's one horse that I am clearly looking out for an entry in one of those races, and that's Nickelback, which was one that I put up at the big price on the handicap podcast we did. So I'm hoping that he's going to turn up in one of those races. I think he probably will, and I'm hoping he's the real low key horse that steams in from a big price. A bit like Bear Grylls last season. So they'd be the ones that I'd be on my mind for those races. There's one or two others. I haven't really spent any time on those races, so apologies, guys, but they're the ones that spring to mind.
No problem. Right. So anything else?
One last. The Novice Hurdle races over Christmas that was mentioned was the Limerick 3 mile race. 2 mile 7, which obviously has huge pointers for the Albert Bartlett. We don't know the entries, so it's very hard to really comment. I wouldn't be surprised though this year if maybe it doesn't have much of a say, just because a lot of the horses haven't been out yet, and that would be probably one race you would not want to put a horse first time out at all. Limerick 2 mile 7.
No.
So yeah, I see what the entries come out with. I imagine it'll be down to horses that have already had a run, which is quite limited. I think if you look through the Albert Bartlett market now, there's not too many that I could see have a run there. Hollow Games.
I was going to say, I did wonder if that was how he'd split the two horses up by using that race.
It just seems like they've not really earmarked that race, surprisingly. And yeah, maybe looking at 2 mile 3 for 2 mile 4 for his next run. But that would make sense.
Is Limerick
had a couple of runs.
Is it the other way around? Is it right-handed Limerick? Is that where Asteria and Forlonge went last year? Yeah, so that might put them off. It might.
Yeah, potentially.
See who's run there.
Just one final thing from me, and we were talking about the sort of the Mullins horses in all of these novice hurdles. It has a very different feel about it to me this season. We're normally reasonably clear on what his better novices are and what the pecking order is normally starting to emerge at this stage. People are starting to get strong fans, and they, from the vibes and from what's happened on the racetrack. It doesn't feel like that this year. It also doesn't feel like that season where it all turned to dust for him 3 or 4 seasons ago. The Mellon year doesn't feel like that. It just feels as though he has a lot of quality, and it's really hard to sift through those that haven't run yet and those that have. Because there is just so many horses potentially for each of those races, more than I've ever known before. And it's not that he ever lacks the quality and depth of quality each season, but I've never seen as much as this season. And I'm sure they've got an idea of what their pecking order is for each race. I'm sure horses will change their minds across the season, but for us, I think it's particularly tough this year. I think we'd normally have a handle on the Willie Mullins horses, or start to get a handle on the Willie Mullins horses by now in the novice hurdles, and I'm not sure any of us have.
No, I think it's been the bumper horses have taken. People have fancied Kilcrut and Sir Gerhard because they're the 2 obvious ones, and we don't know anything else other than them still, do we? And we're in December. Well, the odd.
No, exactly.
Sorry, John, who you were speaking at? Cut you up.
I agree. I don't think any, especially after Kilcrut has a few question marks now, I don't think you could potentially nail a target for any of his runners, essentially. Like Dysart Dynamo, I think Ballymore, I know Saxon Warrior's done a lot of work pointing him in that direction. But I think he could go supreme. I think you play it as if you either back multiple targets or cash out and adapt as the season goes on, or you just let them kind of let the pecking order come about, and then back for short prices, because it's very much up in the air.
Yeah, exactly that. You either do. I agree that you either take the book approach, which you know I do, and you adapt as the season goes on, and that's fine. There's plenty of opportunities if the way that I do it, the combination of cash out and the exchange, then there's plenty of opportunity to not lose on those horses, shall we say, on the balance, and still have the right horses in your book at the right prices. But if I recognise that approach isn't for everybody. It's probably only really an approach for a very few people.
I'm not even doing it this year. It'll be the first year I haven't had a book in the Supreme that I can remember since
I think to have a level of control, you need to do the exchange side too. That makes quite a significant difference.
Yeah, you need to be watching racing as well.
Yeah, you need to be watching racing. But I think the point that John makes there is, if you're not going to take that approach, actually, it's better to go the complete opposite and play the race late. Bigger stakes and play late.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Right. Conscious of time now. We're on 1 minute 10 already. So we've got mares and some general questions to go through. So anything else on novice hurdlers, or are we ready for you to go on to the mares?
No, nothing else from me.
Okay. Do you want to kick us off then?
Crack on with the mares, Paul.
Yeah. Okay. So I think the Big Chang was the one that brought the mares up. So just going to touch briefly on the Grade 2 mares at Christmas at Leopardstown. I'm assuming that she wears it well. Will come out for the first time. All the noises are that she's fully fit and ready to go. So I think they've got to get her out. She needs experience. My biggest concern with her come the festival is the lack of racing and the lack of experience. I think she could be a serious talent, but how many times have horses got there? As talented as they are, and got turned over through lack of battle hardness more than anything else. So I think they've got to take her here, and I think they probably have to take her to the Dublin Racing Festival. There's that big mares handicap hurdle there. Wouldn't care whether she won that or not, to be quite frank. She can run in the first 6, and I'd still be interested in her for the mares hurdle, because she's going to give weight away to pretty much everything in that. So, but they've got to get a couple of races in before the festival. I suppose you could argue and say, well, Willie's the master here, isn't he? If anybody's going to go there with one run, or even in Classical Dreams case, perhaps even no runs, it's Willie. But I just think she has no baseline experience. So even for
Classical Dreams lost his manhood. Big Quavega.
That's a bit random, isn't it?
You said Classical Dream instead of Quavega.
Did I? Oh, apologies.
Yeah.
No, I was talking about Classical Dream this season potentially going there.
Right.
Okay. Runs, but
fair enough.
Quavega is also a good example of the same thing. The fact that she went there time and time again with no runs. So, in fact, she's a better example. But there's a listed mares hurdle at Turles before Christmas that's also worth watching out for. There's been some decent horses running that in the past. Tends not to be the first 3 in this race, but it's not out of the question. And if people are trying to get races in, I think it's a possibility that we might see a decent one of the mares there if they're trying to avoid each other. So just watch out.
Just a brief sidetrack, Paul, because I know you put Heaven Help Us up. How did you feel she ran the weekend?
I actually quite like to run. Actually, I'm still quite sweaty now. For me, I think there's only 3 horses that win this race. She wears it well. Tell Me Something Girl and Heaven Help Us. I'd probably consider Gaulois if they keep her over hurdle and she's out sometime soon. The talk was about going over fences though, so we'll see. I'm kind of open-minded on her more than anything else. I wouldn't be rushing to back her right now, but I'd consider
still
her
33, isn't she?
Yeah, but Heaven Help Us. I thought I have some concerns around her jumping. She's not jumped particularly well the last twice, but she ran on particularly well, I thought, in the race on Saturday. She was taken off her feet a little bit, but that was probably more that she made a couple of mistakes over the first two or three hurdles, so she couldn't get to the front. And I wasn't too bothered really. If she'd run a big race there, they might have been tempted to go to the Champion Hurdle, and she's not run anything there. So, I was kind of okay with the result as well. But I would imagine that she will have one more run before the festival. I would guess they'll probably just do a repeat in the same handicap hurdle I was talking about, the mares handicap hurdle at the Dublin Racing Festival. That's where I suspect they'll send her. They could send her anywhere really, but that would fit with the programme in terms of having a up to peak, and it's a known path for them, so it kind of makes sense irrespective of where she finishes. She'll be carrying a lot more weight this time, of course, so it'll be much tougher for her. But again, I wouldn't be too concerned if she ran a little bit down the field there. It genuinely wouldn't bother me. She'll still be 33-1 then come the festival, I suppose. But I think that the one thing I will say is that the cheap pieces will go back on then. They've kept them off so that they can use them again when they need them, rather than they just get used to the fact that she's there. And the one thing those cheap pieces do is make her concentrate. Her hurdling is a million times better when they're on. And it's something that's worth considering for those people that, perhaps are maybe a little bit disappointed with her. You've got to understand her in the context of the way she races and how she runs. I'm still sweating her. I think 33-1 is a massive price for her. She's running over course and distance that she won in the Coral Cup. It doesn't look the strongest of renewals of the Mares' Hurdle to me. I think that races between her. She wears it well, and Tell Me Something Girl. She's got them. She already has a line on Tell Me Something Girl as well. You've only got to go back and look at 2 bits of form to say that, well, Tell Me Something Girl, she finishes very close to and possibly ahead. So, as I say, with the doubts about the experience of that she wears it well, how little racing she's had, I just think she's a massive bet at 33-1. Okay, the other question that Big Shank asked was views on the mares' novices, and are there any we haven't seen yet to watch out for. There are 3 for me, all Willie Mullins, surprise. There's Haya, who had an entry, I think this weekend, but not taken up, or certainly over this period. So she's certainly fitting well and waiting for the right opportunity. As I presume she didn't take the entry on ground concerns, maybe, I don't know. She's a Kenny Alexander horse. There's Harmony Star over from France. I think she could be useful. And there's also Allegory de Vassy. Say all with Willie Mullins, and it's Allegory de Vassy, the hardest one to say. I'm probably most interested of those that we haven't seen. Willie's obviously got Grandgy and Bell Metal, who's also with Kenny Alexander. Whether they want 2 runners in the race with the same connections, I don't know, but I'd imagine Bell Metal would be the number 1. I quite like her, by the way. I think she is potentially really smart. She's not getting the airtime because we haven't seen her yet this season, but I think she potentially could be very smart. I'm probably sweeter on her than Grandgy, and I like Grandgy. She's entered in an open maiden hurdle at the weekend, so she's going to be out soon, but she's also entered in the Future Champions at Leopardstown over Christmas. So is Grandgy. Again, that Future Champions is an open novice, so that's a pretty good indication of what Willie thinks of those 2. He also has the unraced Allegory de Vassy entered in that race as well. So again, I think if of those 3 that are unraced, that's again probably a good indication of where he thinks they are in the pecking order if he's got an entry for her in an open novice. I think for me, they're the 3 that would be in my mind for the Mares' Novice Hurdle for Willie. As I said, unless he sends
any thoughts on? So, but any thoughts on just she runs tomorrow, Brandy Love?
I think she wants further than 2 miles. She's got the options to potentially prove me wrong, but I think she wants further than 2 miles. I think she's one to keep an eye on, and I think she might be one for next year for the Mares' Hurdle unless they decide to go chasing with her. I think he's got quicker horses than her for the Mares' Novice Hurdle. Look, in terms of open novice hurdles, I think they'll be the 3 that I've got on my mind, and I think someone's got to come and crash the party by putting in a big performance somewhere. But having said that, he's been mob-handed at the race before. That season when Elegantine de Soy won, when he had weren't the first three places like 50 to 1, 66 to 1, and 80 to 1 or something ridiculous for Willie Mullins horses? I can't remember what the actual prices were, but it was just insane. So, that was a season actually, ironically, where he was struggling to get his horses out because of the ground. So it's just possibly he doesn't
throw them all in because they'll.
Yeah, exactly.
He may do that. That's something that he said before that I know I've heard Ruby say as well, that they'll take the chance if they've struggled to get a horse out and it gets past Christmas, they throw him into a grade 1. If they win, fantastic. If they don't, it's fine. Run next year. So
exactly.
Certainly with those mares.
No,
you've still got a novice, haven't you?
Yeah, so that's definitely worth bearing in mind. So
I still like Impervious, by the way. I know I put him up some considerable time ago, and I think a few people were disappointed with her running the Royal Bond. I wasn't particularly. I thought she ran a decent enough race there. The Mares Hurdle is not as tough a race as a Supreme, for example. So I've no problem. She wasn't beaten very far. I thought she was a bit flatter than she had been the previous couple of races. So there's probably better to come, and maybe she just needs to freshen up a little bit. But she's also got an entry in the Future Champion Hurdle, and again, just gives you a good indication of the fact that Colin Murphy rates her highly. He thinks an awful lot of her, and he's a man that knows how to target the festival. He doesn't go far wrong when he sends a horse over to the Cheltenham Festival. So she's the one that's on the radar for him. So I'm not put off by what I've seen by her so far. Mares that have turned up in that race have generally gone pretty well at the festival anyway. So we'll see who takes up the entry. I'll be quite interested to see who's left in there. I suspect probably one of Willie's, and hopefully that's Bell Metal, and maybe Impervious too, for Colin Murphy. Best in the UK right now, I think, are probably LA Bell, Nurse Susan, both with Dan Skelton, and Harry Fry's Lady Adair. She's quite interesting. I think Complied I actually mentioned her on the forum a few days ago. I had her on my mind from her previous run. I think she could be quite smart, but it's always hard to know, what Harry Fry's doing. You hardly see his horses. I also wonder whether one of LA Bell or Nurse Susan might end up down the handicap route. I'm not sure he necessarily wants to send two there. He might find another graded race or go down a different graded route with one of them. But LA Bell, for example, might be interested in something like the Coral Cup. She looks as though she'd get a trip. And if she got the right mark, I think I'd be quite interested for something like the Coral Cup for her. So anyway, that's my rant for the mares. Don't know whether we'll see any of those three over Christmas, of course. We know the programme over in Ireland. It's easier to judge, but I can't not mention the UK horses, because I think there's three decent ones there that are quite capable of taking on the Irish.
Okay. Fab, Jono, any thoughts on the mares, or are you ready?
No, Paul's covered it well there.
Okay, fantastic. So, final section then, it's just a sort of any of the more general questions we had then. So there was, what have we got? Some maiden hurdles. Just a discussion on the hurdling division at the moment being quite poor, and just a mention of the per temps qualifier. So, open there. I know, Paul, you've got a little bit on the per temps, haven't you? Should we save that till the end, or do you want to do that now?
Yeah, no, we can do that now. We've obviously got the per temps qualifier at Leopardstown, which has been, pretty much the go-to race for the per temps final itself. So, I think we all want to see who's entered, and we want to see who runs. So, those horses that finish second to sixth, and normally big players can march, and as usual, the race will revolve around Gordon Elliott, I'm sure. He's had 10 runners in the last 6 per temps finals, and from that he's had 3 winners. And of all of the others, they're at least placed in fifth. So when you look at all the bookie concessions you get in the new year with 5, 6, and even sometimes 7 places, you could almost back his blind. You could back his blind, and you're just going to make money. So you want to know what's running in that clearly. The ones of his that would be on my mind at the moment would be, most of all, I think probably Volcano, Tully Begg, and Mars Harper. You've got Darster Picton, Sassy yet classy, that are qualified. I think Dallas might be better back at 2.5. Has Colin Fire qualified as well? Did I imagine that? He's another one I think might be better at 2.5. Whereas Colin Fire?
Yeah, he's been over fences.
Yes, he has.
He's been over fences.
I tend to mix those two up. It's one of those that I always do. I always get those two mixed up. But whichever way around, I think 2.5 miles might be the go, and maybe the Coral Cup. So the three I'm interested in there for him are Volcano, Tullybeg, and Mars Harbour. The one that I think might go under the radar a bit is Tullybeg, actually. None of those particularly need to go to the Leopardstown qualifier. He's pretty much got them qualified, so maybe he's going a different route this year. I don't know, but Volcano, Mars Harbour, Sassy Yet Classy, Commander Fleet, the aforementioned, all have been on the same sort of route, and they've all been running in the same races. Tullybeg's the odd one out. He qualified in that Cheltenham qualifier that Born Patriot also qualified in, and I'm quite interested in those two. I think that could turn out to be a race that we need to take notice of this year. Born Patriot, I think, would probably be a bit under because he's not with Elliott, and I suspect he'll run a big race in March. I don't think he'll turn up over Christmas. I think they might just hide him away. I think he probably wants better ground anyway, so I think they may just sort of avoid the winter ground with him. So not necessarily one we're looking at over Christmas, but the Gordon Elliott horses are probably going to run at some point, whether they're in the Per Temps qualifier or not, or somewhere else, I don't know. There's one that particularly interests me. Again, this is one I'm going to suggest that people put on their watch list. And this is based on no information. It's just based on pure racing instinct, just experience, really, which means I'm going to get egg on my face and look completely stupid. But I think Ronan McNally is going to try and qualify the Jam Man in that Per Temps qualifier. I think he's going to try and qualify him. He'd be one of those that's running on late in 5th or 6th. And if he gets an entry and he's quoted with cash out beforehand, I'll be taking the money before that race. And if he's not quoted before it, I should be hovering over any bloody button I possibly can, because I think that horse will run a huge race in the potential final if they go that route with him. They'll probably still try and squeeze another pound or two off his mark. There's some lines of form that I find quite interesting with him. And I know we're only we're not doing detail today, so I'm not going to bore people to death with it. But I'd go back to Leopardstown, the William Fly back in 2020 for the start of when I became interested in him. He ran 4th last weekend in that race that Commander of Fleet won. Interestingly, staying on and not never nearer. So, there's something going on with him. And I think the Per Temps final would be perfect if they get him qualified. So I am really interested in. But generally, with the Leopardstown qualifier, I should be very interested in watching the race and be finger hovering over my betting accounts when horses are priced up afterwards. So, and I would just recommend that everybody else is doing the same. If you've got your visiting family, go outside, do something else.
That's great advice anyway, regardless. If you've got family, go outside.
The sound advice here is if you're married and the Per Temps qualifier is on, don't be anywhere near your wife. Because she's going to see you back in about 4 horses straight afterwards. So that's probably it really for me. There's so many handicaps over that Christmas period, it's hard to be definitive and precise, and the Per Temps qualifiers are the easy ones to sort of talk about right now in terms of the festival. So there you go.
Fantastic. Okay, Brill. So what have we got left? So any of the maiden hurdlers? What?
There was actually a quick question about the festival handicaps from last year from Appreciate It. He was asking if he thought there were any that ran in the handicap hurdles last time that might go a bit better this time around, but potential winners. So I do have 2 or 3 in mind, and I have might be on my current watch list. So I thought it's probably worth me just answering that question for him, actually. And I'm sure the other people will have a different view on this and have some other horses they want to talk about. The three returners or potential returners that would interest me are Drop the Anchor, You Raise Me Up, and Langadan. Drop the Anchor for me just looks like one to watch. He's got cross form through all that good Irish handicap hurdle form. And if they can get him back in that race in the low 140s, I think he's a genuine player. But I think they could be tempted to go up in trip and maybe try chance their arm in the Coral Cup rather than the County Hurdle this time. So anyway, I've got my eye on him. One I really have my eye on is You Raise Me Up. He was my favourite in the County Hurdle. He lost his action, finished lame, and still was only beaten 6 lengths. That's a bit of a performance in my mind. He ran a punch down, ran no sort of race, got dropped by the Irish handicapper a couple of pounds. He's run once over fences this season, so clearly you have to watch to see if they try and handicap him over fences rather than hurdles. But I just have a sneaking suspicion that they're going to go back to the festival for another crack at the county. And whatever route they go, I remain interested in him. I think he's a player for a handicap at the festival. And the last one is Langadan. He's probably on most people's lists anyway. For either the Pipe or the Coral Cup, actually, he went up to 140 after the Pipe. So he's obviously not as well handicapped as last time, but there's definitely more improvement to come from him. The concern is he's had a setback, but they've said they're expecting him to be back in the second half of the season, so I'm not particularly worried. And you've only got to look at how Dan Skelton prepped Westcourt for the Greatwood if you have any concerns. He was off for 2 years and then absolutely hosed in the Greatwood. So 3 horses there for me that fit that bill from Appreciate It's question.
Well, do you want to know if you get any that you've had a look at, or we leaving Paul on his own?
No, it's to be honest, it's kind of fairly early with the handicaps for me. I like all those shouts. Langadan is an obvious one. And yeah, the Jam Man definitely is interesting. I'm surprised he's only 8 years old, actually. He's run a bucket loads of times. I think they're all definitely on my radar now.
Excellent. Okay, Brill. So, I don't think... Is there anything else we've missed?
Fahim Machine asked why the open hurdles are so poor at the moment.
We're not interested in what Florian Machine's got to say, have we?
Yeah, they've got nothing to say. He only wins fortunes from bloody bookies. And
a legend.
Fat Jockey are on there.
I tell you what,
he's there.
He needs to come on, doesn't he, and tell us about his bet. Why have I not thought of that before?
I think that's a really good shout, actually. I think
that is a good shout.
We can Machine on here, and
we could do that as a poll. Who wants to hear about Fahim Machine's win?
That's this week's poll. What the Fahim Machine telling us about how he put those 4 horses together for that Yankee. Do you want to hear his story? Yes or no? There you go.
Do you want to hear an hour podcast on him saying it's blind luck?
That's what he was saying as well.
Let me answer his question though, because I do have some thoughts on this. Because I don't disagree with him. I think he's absolutely on the money. I think it really comes down to this obsession with staying chasers. I think that's the largest part of the answer. All we hear is people saying the horse has got the size and scope to jump a fence. But I remember when Brave Incan won the Supreme Novices, and I discussed with Oran Cream, one of his owners, what they'd do the following season, and they were edging towards going novice. They were in 2 minds, but they were edging towards going novice chasing at the point that we had the conversation. And I said I thought they were mad. He was young enough to wait a season and still have a crack at chasing if they wanted to, and they should have a crack at the Champion Hurdle. He's just won a Supreme Novices. And he can go chasing later. And I just felt that they might regret it by not having a go. There was part of the consideration was his breeding. They thought perhaps he wanted further. He was bred to jump a fence. All the things that I was talking about. As it turned out, he was beaten a length by Hardy, Eustace, and Archibald in his first Champion Hurdle. and they then considered going chasing again the following season. I said to Warren, you were beaten length, and no disrespect to Barry Cash if you ever listen to these podcasts, but a top jockey would have been worth more than that length. And to be honest, the rest is history. They got AP on board the following season, and he won his Champion Hurdle. And to be honest, he probably should have been a dual winner. AP was claimed for, I think it was Straw Bear of JP's. So they got Ruby on, and Ruby got into a war on the front with Conrad Dwyer and Hardy Eustace. I don't know whether you guys remember that race, but they just absolutely went to war with each other, eyeballing each other all the way. Of course, the pace collapsed. Hardy Eustace just folded, and Sublimity had just had a typical Paul Carberry ride out the back. Just held on and picked up the pieces and nicked it from Braver Inca up the hill. But he should have been a dual champion hurdler. And the thing is, they could have easily gone chasing. And this is kind of the point. Oren, top man, shout out Oren, if you don't know whether you watch these or not, but Brave Inca was him and his family. He runs the Winning Ways Syndicate horses these days, the best of which they've got at the moment is Royal Kahala. So anyway, apologies to Oren if you're watching this. I didn't mention it for the Mare's Hurdle. But for what it's worth also, I'd probably have done the opposite with her to Brave Inca. I think I'd have sent her chasing this season and had a crack at the Mare's Chase rather than the Mare's Hurdle route that she seems to be on at the moment. But look, I think the general gist of that for me is I think people are just too keen to go chasing too quickly. Sometimes horses are a bit older, when they come out of point fields, and you do need to get on with things, but that's not always the case. And I think sometimes just having that extra season to have a look, it's worth it. We've seen horses coming back both in the Stayers Hurdle and in the Champion Hurdle over the last few years that went chasing because it didn't quite work out, that became Stayers Hurdle winners and Champion Hurdle winners.
I think is that
the best ever in the Stayers division. We had Bouvardere, we mentioned him earlier, doing that in the Champion Hurdle. So,
I think is that not the point though, Paul? Sorry to interrupt you, mate, but is that not the point that if you go chasing, it opens up a lot more? Because let's rule out no one cares about a Stayers Hurdle if you win any Novice Hurdle race, really, other than the Albert Barlow. It's not something you'd grow up dreaming of. When you've got the option of, so you've either got the Champion Hurdle and then the best middle distance races at Aintree, which no one really is, again, getting into the sport for. So you've got one race. Or if you go chasing, you open up then the route of either ARC or Champion Chase. You've got the potential of having a Gold Cup horse. There's plenty of people that love the middle distance chases. There's just more prestigious chases to win, which is why you do that, knowing full well you can go back into the hurdle divisions. I think for me that'd be why you would lean going chasing. That's why for me, to answer the question, novices go that way because it opens up more doors for them and you're not losing out. Whereas if you don't go chasing, you never know. So you're either going right with we either try and see if we've got a Champion Hurdle horse, or we're just nowhere. Now, not that obviously if you've got any horse good enough to even run at the festival, that's amazing. But just as a general consensus, that's why I would think more horses go novice chasing, because it just opens up more doors, and that's, I suppose, what you want. Now, my personal opinion, Champion Chase and Gold Cup are way clear of a Champion Hurdle as well. Those two races are top tier. Then your Champion Hurdle's next, and then there's a big gap down to anything else that I'd be that interested in. That's a ludicrous sentence. What I mean is those three races are the big three in our sport. Then maybe the Grand National for me, but then you Tingle Creeks and King George's before I can think of any other hurdle race that I'd even dream of winning, I suppose.
Yeah, I don't disagree with any of that, Kev, but I think, when you've got, novice hurdlers running at 5, where's the rush? There's definitely a trend, and we touched it when we talked about the Gold Cup horses, that, Gold Cup winners tend to be very often 7 years old. But they're 7 years old because they've spent no time over hurdles, doesn't mean they're not going to be Gold Cup winners when they're 8 and they had a season in Open Cup over hurdles. So I get your point about opening up more options as soon as you do that. It opens up more options over fences. The Bouverdaires and the Big Bucks are kind of flukes, aren't they? They went back because they couldn't jump a fence, basically. You know, it was as basic as that. It wasn't a plan. And we could have never seen, you know, a 4-time Stayers hurdle winner if Big Bucks could have jumped a fence. I mean, he probably would never have been a Gold Cup winner. You know, who knows? But you know, unlikely during that sort of era. So, you know, we'd have been robbed of, you know, something that was pretty special. I thought. Bouverdaire slightly different. You know, was he a classic? You know, top end champion hurdle winner? No. But that's kind of the point that the Heat Machine is making. The champion hurdle has been thin on the ground for some considerable time now because they're all rushing off to go over fences. There's an argument that says, you know, Honeysuckle is so far ahead of the rest at the moment, and she's so far ahead of the rest because of the lack of competition. And, you know, we don't know how good she is. You know, is she a really good champion hurdler? Is she an average champion hurdler that's just beating poor champion hurdle contenders? I don't know. I actually just don't know, and it disappoints me that I feel that way, having seen some absolute classic champion hurdlers in the past. You know, sadly, you know, in my formative years of learning about racing, it was the 70s, and you know, it was just such an exciting time to watch champion hurdles with some names that sort of live on today. You know, I'm fortunate enough to have a friend that owned Brave Inca, and some of those champion hurdles around that time were absolute classics. But name the last one. That's the problem I have, and I think Fahim Machine's right. It's, you know, it's poor. They're poor for a reason, because there is this rush to go chasing when there is no reason not to go and find out if you've got a champion hurdle horse. And I agree. You know, are you going to hang around to see if you've got a Stayers hurdle horse? Probably not. But you know, if you've got a horse that's quick enough, why would you not find out over hurdles? I would. You know, personally, if I had just had a horse that's just run a massive race in the Supreme, irrespective of the record running into a champion chase, my horse is still every bit as good, you would hope, you know, with a year's experience under his belt, and going a season later if necessary. But
so what would you have done with Appreciate It this year then with his age?
I'd have gone chasing with him. He's older. Okay. You know, there isn't time to waste with him because, you know, he was a 7-year-old. But, you know, if he was 5, possibly even 6, but certainly 5, I'd have wanted to find out if I had a champion hurdle horse as a 6-year-old.
Would you prefer a champion hurdle horse to a champion chase horse? I know this is a silly hypothetical, but
no, it's not actually, because my favourite race and my dream to win is the champion chase. So I'm saying that despite my dream being to win a champion chase.
Yeah,
I would want a champion chaser above all others. I just love watching those horses jump at that speed.
Yeah, I think that's why. If for me, being a National Hunt fan, watching like hurdles is just in between. Like bumper, I've no real interest in at all. Hurdles are it's just getting on the way. It's not the point of the sport. Like there's some flat horses that are absolutely fantastic and worthy of conversation because they're the best of the species. But I think if you're into National Hunt, it's about them jumping the big obstacles, the big tests, and that's why I think inherently that's what draws people to the sport, and that's why I think most owners are interested in going chasing and things. But I don't know. I can only speak for myself, I suppose. But yeah,
I have the champion hurdle really high on my list of races, and you know, you mentioned the 3 races. You know, Gold Cup, champion chase, champion hurdle. You know, I don't think anybody would be unhappy at winning any of those.
No, Johnny's a big fan of the Ryanair. I know he prefers that to the champion chase or the Gold Cup. The way he bangs on about it.
It's the feature race on the Thursday, isn't it? I think you'll find.
Soon to be the the feature race on the Saturday, maybe. Has there been any
You
word
know,
on that?
Just on this point as well, do you think it's just the dominance of the kind of point-to-point scene? I know, obviously, Honeysuckle was a point-to-pointer, Fahim was a point-to-pointer, but I mean, see how many horses are coming through that rank now. Do you think that's had a say? I mean, that's got to have played a part as well.
Yeah,
definitely. And it comes back to that whole point about people wanting staying chasers, doesn't it? That's what people are looking for. It's the trendy thing to do. Again, I think I might have touched on this. I've either written about it on the website or we've talked about it. I can't remember which. But I think Nicky Henson is really good at finding those horses at the point fields that have speed. It's not a coincidence that he has the record in the Arkle and the Champion Chase that Willie Mullins doesn't. People find nice Kev. People find people specialise, don't they? They have a knack, and Henson buys those kind of horses particularly well, and it's why of the British trainers why he has that great record in the Supreme too.
Yeah. Fantastic. Brilliant. Right. Okay, so I think that brings us to the end then, doesn't it? Anyone got anything else to say?
One final question from Odin, and that was, is it a disadvantage for those horses that haven't run yet this season? And really, that's simple. No. If they're with one of the big trainers, it doesn't worry me at all. So that was the last question, I think, that we had on the podcast.
I'd agree with that.
Wasn't something else.
Hey, imagine if we answered all the questions that succinctly.
7-minute podcast, everybody be happy. Everybody get praise.
Fantastic. Right, so the plan next week is to discuss the Novice Chasers, isn't it? Over the Christmas period, so it'll be a similar format to this. We may have Kivega on, I believe, although I haven't actually sorted that or spoke to you two properly about it, so probably best not to do that live at the end of a 1 hour 45-minute podcast.
Yeah. I will put up a thread for questions for that for next week. So I'll drop that on the forum this evening.
Yes, and I will have a word with Jacko for He Machine, because I guess the poll is going to be quite strong that we get him on for a little chat about that incredible.
Absolutely.
Last year and the year before, which is the most amazing thing about it, isn't it? Really.
Yeah. There's no fluke. There's no fluke about it at all. Whether he says those words or not, there is no fluke.
And you're forgetting the most important thing. He's going to tell us which is the multiple for this year.
That's the thing.
If he needs give us the winning multiple 2022. No pressure.
Fantastic. Right. Thank you very much for everyone's questions. That was brilliant. I think that's a good format. We'll definitely do that again next week. And probably going on again.
Good point.
So yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. If you've got this far, and if not, you'll never know. So
there you go. Absolutely.
Right. Bye, everyone.
Cheers, guys. See you soon.
Cheers, everyone. Bye.